Candace toasted her mother's death, wine in hand, smile rehearsed. Then Evelyn walked through the door. Alive. Watching. Ready. "I'm not gone," she said. "Just done pretending you were ever a daughter." Silence cracked the room like glass. The mother she erased had returned to reclaim everything with her name still on it. "Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe." The chair faced the window, angled just enough to catch the morning light that spilled through sheer curtains like faded breath. Evelyn sat there, head cocked slightly to the right, legs tucked under a thin hospice blanket, her hands slack in her lap. To anyone walking by, she looked empty, vacant, gone. But inside, her mind hummed like wires behind drywall, quiet, hot, and absolutely alive. The door creaked open. "Heavy air in here," Candace said lightly, walking in like it was a hotel room. Her husband, Stuart, followed, scrolling through something on his phone. She clutched a green smoothie and sipped loudly. "Morning, Ms. Evelyn," the nurse said gently from the side, adjusting a chart. "Vitals steady, that's a good thing." Evelyn's eyes flicked once, subtle, deliberate. "Oh, come on," Candace muttered with a brittle laugh. "You're giving her too much credit. She's just a body in a chair." The room didn't flinch, but Evelyn did, internally. The words sunk like a pin through silk straight into memory. A body in a chair. The phrase hung there, grotesque and real, and something inside Evelyn clicked, not like a snap, but a slow-turning lock. Years peeled back without warning. Candace, at 16, storming out of the kitchen after Evelyn had said no to a weekend trip. Candace, at 25, crying into Evelyn's arms after her second miscarriage. Candace, at 42, asking for another temporary loan and never saying thank you, not once. Stuart let out a laugh. "Well, she's quiet now, that's something." They chatted over Evelyn's head, as if she were a lamp. Stuart commented on the football game. Candace asked the nurse about her shift. None of them looked her in the eye. None except the nurse, Marcia, mid-50s, soft-spoken, the kind of woman who noticed everything and said very little. She was standing near the bed, adjusting the IV line, when she paused, really paused, and looked into Evelyn's face. Their eyes locked. Marcia tilted her head. "You tracking me, Ms. Evelyn?" Evelyn didn't move. Couldn't, not really, but her gaze didn't drift. It pinned Marcia right where she stood. A flicker of something passed between them. Recognition. A silent, mutual, "I see you." Outside, a wind picked up. Leaves scraped the glass. Evelyn's breathing deepened, not labored, just aware. Present. Awake. Candace snapped her gum. "All right, let's go. I have that fundraiser call in 20. As the couple left, Candace turned back one last time. "Hope she didn't hear that," she said under her breath. Evelyn did. Every syllable. When the door clicked shut, Marcia stepped closer. She bent near Evelyn's ear, voice barely audible. "They don't know what you still got, do they?" A blink. Slow. Measured. That was all the answer Evelyn could give. Marcia smiled faintly. "Good. Let's keep it that way." She turned and wheeled out the vitals cart, her shoes whispering across the tile. Evelyn sat alone again, in that chair by the window. Her heart beat steady, not because it had to, but because it wanted to, because something had reawakened, something long pressed down under years of giving and forgiving. She wasn't done. Not yet. Outside the window, a bird landed on the ledge and hopped once, then again. It tilted its head at her, curious. Evelyn blinked back. Then, so subtly it was almost imperceptible, the corner of her mouth moved. Just a hair. It wasn't a smile. It was a promise. The next morning, Marcia didn't greet Evelyn like a patient. She came in early, pulled the blinds halfway, and adjusted the chair so Evelyn could better see the hallway. Then she turned the overhead lights off, leaving the room lit in soft golds and shadows. It looked more like a study now than a cell for dying. "You want quiet," Marcia said, setting a fresh notepad on the side table, "and I want you watching." She left it at that. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn felt like someone was working with her, not on her. 2 days later, Marcia returned during shift change, her jacket on, purse over her shoulder, and eyes sharp with purpose. "Friend of mine owes me a favor," she said softly, checking Evelyn's IV as cover. "Used to be a mobility rehab nurse. Works out of a private clinic now. No paperwork if you don't want it. Just hands." Evelyn blinked, slow and steady. Marcia smiled. "Good. I thought so." She began arranging brief 10-minute sessions under the guise of repositioning therapy. Every third day the woman came in, gruff, strong, mid-60s with biceps like braided cables. She said little, worked quick, and gave Evelyn tiny goals: grip a stress ball for 5 seconds, lift a foot, hold her own head straight. Each task came with a whisper Evelyn repeated in her head like gospel: "This is not your end. This is your re-entry." By week 2, Evelyn could push her right foot against the wheelchair footrest with conscious intent. By week 3, she could tap her fingers in a slow rhythm when no one was watching. Candace didn't notice. She had stopped calling, stopped visiting, sent one bouquet with a bland card. "Thinking of you during this difficult time." Stuart texted a nurse once to ask if the TV in Evelyn's room got ESPN, but Jonah came, always on Fridays, sometimes with a soda he knew she liked, peach knee-high, and sometimes just to sit beside her and talk about college applications, the broken AC in his car, a girl named Ivy who liked the same obscure sci-fi books he did. He didn't fake cheer. He didn't talk down. He read to her sometimes, Murakami of all things, and once paused mid-page, voice cracking. "I don't know how you still have that fire in your eyes," he whispered, "but it's there." Evelyn blinked and he smiled, relieved, like he'd been waiting to be seen by someone. That night, after Jonah left, Evelyn tapped the notepad on the side table with the edge of her thumb. Marcia raised her eyebrows. "You want to write something?" Evelyn blinked twice. Marcia leaned in close. "What name?" With a pencil in hand, she slowly worked through the alphabet aloud. Evelyn's eyelid twitched at CC. Marcia guessed. A blink. She kept going. At A, Evelyn blinked again. "C, A." It took 10 minutes, but eventually they got the name. Calhoun, Evelyn's estate lawyer, not someone Marcia expected. "You want me to find him?" A slow, deliberate blink. Marcia gave a low whistle. "You're not just thinking. You're planning." That night, Evelyn didn't sleep. She sat in the dim light, hand resting over the worn arm of the chair, staring out the dark window as if trying to memorize the stars. Marcia made the call the next morning. The number was still good. "Mr. Calhoun?" she said. "You might want to sit down. Evelyn Hargrove isn't gone, not even close." The nurse's station buzzed with quiet chatter as the night shift rotated out. Paperwork shuffled, doors clicked open and closed. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, which was exactly the point. At 6:42 a.m., a transportation van pulled up behind the hospice, engine purring. Marcia met it at the side entrance, clipboard in hand, heart thudding in her throat. The driver, early 50s, tall, silent, helped lift Evelyn into the back without a word. No one from the family had signed a release form, because no one from the family knew. By the time the sun had cleared the rooftops, Evelyn was gone. She sat upright in the van, legs trembling from the effort, but held in place by quiet will. The leather seat creaked beneath her with each turn, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the raw charge of forward motion. No one said goodbye. No one followed. The suite was tucked behind a nondescript storage complex off FM 1960, a place Evelyn had quietly helped her best friend secure years ago after a bitter divorce. Her name was still on the deed. The friend had passed on, but the property stood untouched. White siding, blackout curtains, no HOA. The driver carried her inside, careful but unceremonious. As soon as he left, Evelyn pulled herself into the waiting chair near the window and sat in silence, absorbing the feel of her own air. Then came the knock. Mr. Calhoun stepped inside wearing the same weathered blazer and expressionless jawline he'd had for 30 years. The moment he saw her, truly saw her, he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since 2007. "You really are the devil in pearls," he said, closing the door behind him. Evelyn blinked. A slow grin ghosted across his lips. "I brought everything," he added, tapping the case on the table. "If you're serious, we're not just changing names. We're lighting the whole damn map on fire." The case clicked open. Paperwork spread across the table like a battlefield blueprint. The family trust, the deed to the primary residence, the old will Candace had insisted on streamlining. Evelyn reached for a pen. Her hand trembled. Calhoun didn't help her steady it. That, more than anything, earned her trust back. She began to underline, slowly, deliberately. Her finger tapped next to Jonah's name on an outdated life insurance clause. She drew a small circle around the section titled Revocation Rights. Calhoun sat down across from her and opened his legal pad. "Candace will fight," he warned. "The house alone is enough to spark war." Evelyn blinked once. "Then again," he continued, cracking his knuckles, "you always did like being underestimated." The room went quiet for a beat, and then, like an old tape spool rewinding, Evelyn's mind pulled her backward. Candace on the couch, mascara smeared, divorce papers on the coffee table, Evelyn remembering how her own fingers trembled as she wrote the check. The way Candace had said, "Just until I get back on my feet, Mama. You'll get it all back." Except she never did. Evelyn had paid off Candace's mortgage, co-signed the refinance when Stuart's job went sideways, covered Ivy League tuition for a degree Candace never finished. She never asked for repayment, but she had quietly, foolishly expected grace. Instead, she got silence. And now? Now Candace had the gall to write her off like spoiled furniture. The memory burned, but Evelyn let it. She needed the sting. Calhoun reached across the table, not with comfort, but with a hard plastic folder. Inside, documents to begin transferring real property to a new revocable trust. "This changes everything," he said. "But it'll hold." Evelyn took the pen again. Signed, initialed. The sound of it, ink dragging across legal parchment, felt like thunder in her veins. When it was done, Calhoun leaned back. "You're sure she doesn't know you're out?" Evelyn blinked once, then again. Sharp. Final. "No one does," he murmured. "That's a hell of a head start." The paperwork moved fast. Calhoun filed the updated trust under a sealed designation, quietly reassigning primary assets, real estate, liquid funds, retirement portfolios, into a living trust, listing Jonah as the sole successor trustee. Evelyn didn't ask for ceremony. She asked for clarity. They met 3 more times that week, quietly, methodically, and never at the same address. On Friday night, Evelyn called for a driver. "Just take me past the house," she mouthed to Marcia earlier that day. One time. At 9:06 p.m., the car pulled into her old neighborhood, tucked behind a gate with a stone guardhouse she paid for after the HOA couldn't afford upgrades. Her name was still on the land that gate was built on. No one ever said thank you. The driver killed the headlights. Evelyn watched from the tinted rear window as the porch light flickered on. Candace's SUV sat crooked in the driveway. A second car, Jonah's father's, was double-parked halfway over the lawn. She asked the driver to wait. Inside, the lights were on in every room. Evelyn entered through the unlocked back patio. Her own key still worked. The interior smelled like jasmine-scented candles and something burnt. The living room had changed. Her antique sideboard was gone, replaced by a glittering mirrored cabinet stocked with unopened gin bottles. The oil painting Evelyn bought in Santa Fe had been replaced by a chrome and glass wall sculpture spelling BREATHE in block letters. She moved slowly, observing, not reacting. In the kitchen, the new backsplash was teal. Her solid oak cabinetry had been painted over in glossy white, chipping already at the corners. Someone had left a used towel on the marble island, Evelyn's island. Then she opened the pantry and saw the receipts, a stack of shopping bags stuffed carelessly in the corner, Neiman Marcus, Saks, a spa in River Oaks. On the countertop nearby sat her own checkbook, cracked open, a pen still clipped to the register. The handwriting wasn't hers. Later that night, she sat in her rented suite with the statements spread out before her. Calhoun was quiet as he scanned them. High-end cookware, he muttered. Luxury retreats? Golf cart lease? Evelyn circled a transaction and wrote, joint checking, then underlined it. He nodded. We freeze it tomorrow. Pull her access completely. By Monday morning, Candace's world hiccuped for the first time. She tapped her platinum card at a wellness spa in the Woodlands and watched the receptionist's polite smile falter. I'm sorry, ma'am. It's not going through. Candace blinked. Try again. Still nothing. She texted Stuart something flippant, but her stomach twisted. Across town, Jonah checked the mail and found a small, padded envelope addressed in Evelyn's handwriting. Inside, a single folded letter, a black and white photo of Evelyn as a young woman in front of the old Hargrove Ranch, and a line that read, You'll know soon why I picked you. No signature. No return address. That night, Evelyn sat in the silence of her suite, watching the ceiling fan spin. Marcia sat on the edge of the bed, holding her phone. I got a name, she said, handing over a business card. He's discreet. Ex-IRS, licensed out of Austin now. No social media, no leaks. Evelyn blinked once. Private investigator, Marcia said. If Candace is dipping into more than what we saw, he'll find it. Evelyn didn't blink this time. She just reached for the card, held it in her fingers, and stared at it like a match she hadn't lit yet. The late afternoon sun bled through the blinds in Evelyn's temporary suite, casting angled shadows across the coffee table where a half-drunk cup of chamomile tea sat untouched. Calhoun stood by the window with his phone pressed tightly to his ear, nodding slowly as he listened. His silence stretched for so long that Evelyn, from her chair, tilted her head slightly, catching the shift in his body language. She had come to recognize this quiet, a stillness not of peace, but of calculation. When he finally hung up, he didn't speak right away. He simply opened his leather satchel and drew out a printed PDF. It was a government-issued form, stamped, sealed, and disturbingly familiar. Evelyn extended a hand, and he placed it in her fingers. Her eyes scanned the first section. Application for redirection of pension disbursement. She recognized the federal header, the structured formatting. She recognized her name in bold typed letters. And then she saw the signature, her own name forged in ink with the subtlest betrayals, the E looped too high, the V curled like a flower stem. Stylized, feminine. Not hers, never hers. She filed this 6 months ago, Calhoun said, his voice low and grim. Certified a physician's note claiming you were permanently incapacitated and mentally unfit to manage your finances. Had your pension checks redirected to a new account under her name. I've already requested bank logs and backdated deposits. This wasn't a mistake. It was strategic. Evelyn didn't respond immediately. Her jaw tightened as she drew the form closer. Her thumb rested against the corner as if weighing whether to tear it in half or let it linger as evidence. There had always been lies, but this was not passive neglect. This was theft with paperwork and premeditation. I think, Calhoun continued, we're past the point of denial. That night, Evelyn sat alone beneath the soft yellow glow of the bedside lamp. The legal pad she kept beside her had been turned to a fresh sheet. At the top, she wrote slowly, a confrontation should not be a collapse. It must be earned. She spent the next 2 hours drafting a step-by-step timeline. What Candace had taken, when she had taken it, and how Evelyn intended to dismantle her grip without ever raising her voice. Calmness was not weakness. It would be her armor now. 2 days later, Jonah called. His voice, even through the speaker, carried tension she had not heard before. He sounded uncertain, careful. He asked if she was all right. He said his parents were telling him strange things, that she was confused, mistaking people for long-dead friends, writing things that didn't make sense. Evelyn listened without interrupting, and when he paused to wait for a response, she simply sent him a single email, already drafted and sitting in her drafts folder. The subject line read, I trust you to read, not just react. The attachments included copies of the fraudulent pension form, scanned transactions from the misused joint account, and a 2-page letter written in Evelyn's unshakably neat hand. You were never meant to carry this weight, Jonah. But someone has to see it clearly. Don't believe words. Believe paper. Believe signatures. Believe patterns. And believe this. The truth is yours now, whether you want it or not. Jonah didn't respond that night. He spent 3 hours alone in the university's quiet study lounge, going over every document. He enlarged the forms, compared handwriting, scrolled back through old text messages from his mother. By the time he reached the bottom of Evelyn's letter, his hands were trembling. At home, Candace was already trying to preempt the fallout. She left a voicemail for Jonah, feigning concern, claiming she had received strange letters from Evelyn too. "She's confused," she said, the smile audible in her voice. "She's not malicious, just slipping." Jonah didn't call back. Not that day, not the one after. At the suite, Calhoun returned with a final draft of Evelyn's revised will. Together they reviewed it line by line, Evelyn holding the pen steady as she signed each page with purpose. Jonah was now sole beneficiary, executor, end-of-life agent. Everything that once belonged to a family now belonged to one young man, and the future he hadn't yet decided on. When it was done, Calhoun handed her a small office shredder. Evelyn took the original will, pristine, full of old promises, and fed it through the blades without hesitation. The machine whirred and chewed, rendering the pages into thin ribbons of ash-gray regret. She gathered the shreds, placed them in a heavy manila envelope, and sealed it shut with a long strip of black electrical tape. No return address, no signature, just one word scrawled across the front in Sharpie block letters: voided. She dropped it in the mail that afternoon. Candace lit the third candle with the same flourish she used when signing fake sympathy cards. The dining room flickered in golden light, strategically dim, just enough to hide the flaws in the paint job she'd rushed last month. The new chandelier gleamed overhead, crystals chiming faintly in the air conditioning's hum. A 20-seat table stretched wall to wall, covered in imported linen and rimmed with white porcelain plates. She had no intention of washing herself. She was already on her second glass of Merlot. "Tonight," she declared to the room, "we celebrate freedom and new chapters and upgrades." Laughter chimed from the guests, colleagues from her fundraising committee, 2 neighbors who'd never known Evelyn well, a lifestyle blogger Candace had invited just for social clout. Jonah sat near the end of the table, half smiling, watching his mother sip, charm, and spin. He hadn't planned to come, but curiosity had a weight of its own. A place card with his name, stylized in gold calligraphy, had waited at the table like a trap. The whole setup screamed showmanship, not remembrance. There were no photos of Evelyn in the house, no mention of her recovery or illness, only champagne, catered risotto, and casual jokes about reclaiming energy. He leaned over to examine the centerpiece, an extravagant floral sculpture with ivory orchids and peacock feathers. The cost alone made his stomach tighten. "Mom," he said softly during the toast lull, "where did all this come from?" Candace smiled tightly, her voice too high. "Let's just say I finally cashed in on some peace." The guests laughed again. It was rehearsed, polite, effortless. Jonah didn't join them. "She'll be gone before the month's out," Candace added, swirling her wine. "But at least she gave me one last gift, this house." A few guests chuckled uneasily. One glanced toward Jonah, then quickly away. He set his fork down. Candace leaned closer to him, her teeth white and pointed in the candlelight. "Don't be so sensitive. You think she's coming back? You saw the paperwork." Jonah didn't respond, but his eyes narrowed slightly just as the butler, borrowed from a friend, opened the front door. Everyone turned at the creak of hinges. He didn't announce a name. He didn't have to. The room went still as Evelyn stepped inside. She moved with deliberate slowness, aided by a sleek graphite cane and a posture more elegant than anyone remembered. Her hair was pulled back, her lipstick a deep plum that matched the simple silk scarf wrapped around her neck. For a moment, all that could be heard was the low chime of ice melting in someone's glass. "Evening," Evelyn said, her voice husky but clear. "Hope I'm not interrupting." No one spoke. Candace's wineglass lowered halfway to the table and stayed there, frozen mid-air. Her face dropped all its rehearsed ease, replaced by something rigid and pale. "I was told there'd be dinner," Evelyn continued, stepping further into the room, "and that it would be in my house. Figured I'd bring my appetite." Jonah stood up slowly. His chair scraped the floor like a drawn blade. "Grandma," he said softly. Candace finally found her voice. "You shouldn't be here." Evelyn turned toward her, one brow slightly raised. "I built this room, sweetheart. Chose the tile myself. Of course I should be here." Gasps came in low waves from the guests, some glancing at each other with tight, uncomfortable expressions. The lifestyle blogger subtly began filming beneath the table. Candace looked toward the butler, but he was already gone, vanished through the kitchen door, unwilling to get between two women who clearly shared blood and a very long history. Evelyn reached the head of the table and placed her hand lightly on the back of her old chair, the one Candace had nearly thrown out 2 months ago. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said. No one objected. No one breathed. "To good taste," Evelyn began, lifting a crystal flute someone had abandoned. "To memory. And to knowing what belongs to you and what never will." Her gaze locked with Candace's as she raised her glass. "To Evelyn Hargrove." A slow ripple of shocked laughter moved through the guests, half admiration, half disbelief. Candace sat completely still. "I see you made changes," Evelyn said, surveying the table. "Let's hope your receipts are cleaner than your conscience." Jonah exhaled sharply, caught between fury and awe. Candace sat cross-legged on the velvet couch in Evelyn's former den, the same one she'd had reupholstered in seafoam green to match her new wellness aesthetic. Her manicured fingers toyed absent-mindedly with a gold wine charm as she opened the thick envelope that had been waiting on the porch that morning. No return address, but her name handwritten across the front in a script she couldn't mistake. The moment she unfolded the first sheet, her body stiffened. There were no pleasantries, no warning notes, just line after line of account activity, deed transfers, notarized affidavits, and digital logs, all tied to her name, most of it in direct violation of Evelyn's original estate parameters. Attached to the back of the stack was a single pink post-it. "You've confused proximity with permission. I'm correcting that for both of us. E.H." Candace read it 3 times before tossing the entire packet across the room. The pages fanned out like falling cards: bank logs, power of attorney revocation forms, and a letter of intent to pursue civil recovery of assets. She stared at the mess and, for the first time, didn't know how to spin it. She reached for her phone. 2 hours later, they met in neutral territory. An empty art gallery Evelyn had once donated to, now closed for renovations. Its white walls and bare floors offered no distractions, no noise, just 2 chairs, facing each other like the final act in a minimalist play. Evelyn sat already waiting, dressed in black slacks and a wool blazer that carried a subtle scent of lavender and thyme. Her cane rested lightly across her lap. She didn't rise when Candace entered. She didn't need to. Candace, trying to reclaim control, walked in with a purse too large and sunglasses too dark for the weather outside. She lowered them slowly but said nothing, just crossed her arms. "I didn't expect a war," Candace said after a beat. "But you never did know when to let things go." Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "I just know when something stops belonging to me." Candace gave a tight, sarcastic laugh. "You mean Jonah? Because that's what this is about, isn't it? He's been feeding you poison, and you've just swallowed it whole." "I'm not here to argue," Evelyn replied, her voice even. "I'm here to clarify." From her coat pocket she pulled a small recorder, clicked it on, and set it gently on the chair between them. Candace stared at it. "Are you serious?" "I am," Evelyn said, "because someday soon someone will ask me if I gave you a chance to explain, and I want proof that I did." For the next 30 minutes, Evelyn asked questions, simple, factual, devastating. She asked about the pension redirection, the forged signature on medical forms, the house upgrades paid for with shared accounts. She asked where Candace had gotten the idea that caring for a dying parent gave her ownership of everything they left behind. Candace denied some things, danced around others. At one point, she leaned forward and hissed, You've never been easy to love, you know that? You made everything conditional. Your money, your time, always strings, always measuring. I measured because I had so little left to give, Evelyn said quietly, and I gave it anyway. When it was done, she clicked off the recorder and stood with more strength than Candace expected. I'll have this notarized, she said, just in case. Outside the gallery, Jonah stood by the curb, leaning against his car. He had insisted on coming, though Evelyn had warned him not to engage. As Candace exited the building, she spotted him. Their eyes met, and for the first time he didn't look away. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just stood. A silent verdict. News of the dinner party and Evelyn's dramatic return had already begun to echo through their community. The lifestyle blogger had posted a cryptic caption with a blurry video. Some ghosts wear pearls. Some own the room. Whispers spread quickly, and with the whispers came questions. Why was Candace living in Evelyn's home? Why did Evelyn look more lucid than ever? Why had Candace erased all traces of her mother from the house? By week's end, 2 former friends from Candace's volunteer board had quietly removed her from a planning committee. One sent a polite email that ended with, "We just want to let things settle." They were settling all right, just not in the way Candace imagined. The office was modest. 2 rooms above a community library Evelyn had once helped fund, back when she still believed her giving would echo back through her family. The carpet was thin, the walls faded, but the desk was real wood, and the sunlight through the narrow window hit just right in the afternoons. Jonah insisted she take the larger room. "You're the founder," he'd said. "You should sit where it feels earned." The letterhead read, "The Arthur Hargrove Resilience Scholarship." The name had taken her longer to settle on than she expected, not because she doubted the cause, but because she hadn't spoken her late husband's name aloud in months, not since her stroke. When the notary asked if she wanted it spelled Art or Arthur, Evelyn took a moment, then scrawled out every letter in full. He had earned that dignity. He'd spent 42 years earning it beside her. The scholarship would go to students with no parental safety net, no emergency contact, no backup plan, just grit, GPA, and guts. On their first day of interviews, Jonah brought donuts and wore a tie so stiff it looked painful. Evelyn just smiled at him, eyes warm above her coffee cup, as he nervously organized the applicant folders. "She's the one," he said after they met a girl named Tasha, foster-raised, already working 2 jobs, and still managing a 3.9. "She reminds me of you." Evelyn didn't speak, but her fingers lightly tapped the table as if marking approval in Morse. Within a month, Tasha was part of their world. Evelyn met with her weekly, quietly listening, offering advice on budgeting and boundaries, sometimes just slipping an extra transit card into her coat pocket. Tasha didn't ask for pity, only guidance. Evelyn gave it, freely, for the first time, to someone who didn't carry her blood but had inherited her fight. Meanwhile, the fallout continued to blossom in Candace's carefully curated social orbit. The whispers hadn't stopped after the dinner party. If anything, they had gotten louder. One by one, the friends Candace had spent years building like a personal brand peeled away. It began with unreturned texts, then came skipped RSVPs, and finally a boutique invitation list Candace found out about only because she wasn't on it. The story had legs and a camera. That blog video kept making rounds. Some ghosts wear pearls, some own the room. Evelyn never commented publicly. She didn't need to. Instead, she received a letter in the mail one gray Wednesday, sealed in a pale blue envelope and postmarked from Dallas. The handwriting made her sit down before opening it. "Evelyn, I heard about the scholarship, and I just want to tell you, Art would be so proud. Do you remember the day he brought over those peaches you canned? You had a way of turning survival into something beautiful. Still do. June Abbott." She hadn't heard that name in 30 years. Evelyn folded the letter twice and pressed it to her chest, inhaling. It was the first time in a long, long stretch of weary weeks that her smile didn't carry the flavor of restraint. It arrived gently, like a season turning. Across town, Candace sat on the edge of her bed in silence, her phone glowing dimly in her hand. The message she had just typed was long. Too long. She had rewritten it 5 times, deleting every half-baked apology and replacing it with nostalgic phrases, weak bridges. There was no signature. Only a final line. "Please, just let me explain. You can't hate me forever." She hesitated, thumb hovering. Then hit send. Evelyn saw the notification blink onto her phone mid-meeting. She didn't open it. She placed the phone face down, turned to Jonah, and asked him to pull up the next applicant's file. She'd answer when she was ready. The library Evelyn chose wasn't flashy, just a small, red-brick municipal branch on the edge of town. The main reading room had been cleared for the occasion, chairs arranged in a gentle horseshoe beneath the sloping arches of oak-paneled ceilings. The air smelled faintly of dust and lemon polish, and outside, rain threatened without commitment. Jonah arrived first, helping Evelyn out of the car and into her wheelchair, despite her quiet insistence she could walk the final few feet. She wore a navy skirt suit and her late husband's cufflinks, polished so they glinted in the muted light. Her hair was pulled back, face serene, unreadable. Inside the hall, people murmured in low voices, neighbors, distant cousins, 2 former bridge partners who hadn't visited in years, but showed up now, noses sharpened by expectation. Candace swept in 10 minutes late, trailed by her 2 adult children, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. She wore white, not beige, not cream, white. A pantsuit tailored within an inch of its life, chosen with the same precision she used to arrange centerpieces. She smiled like someone attending an unveiling, not a reckoning. Evelyn said nothing as she entered. Jonah stood behind her with a quiet strength that radiated down the line. He offered no nod to Candace, no recognition of her presence, just placed a single hand on the back of Evelyn's chair. Mr. Calhoun cleared his throat and opened a dark leather folio. "Thank you all for coming. Per Evelyn Hargrove's expressed and legally certified request, this is not a traditional posthumous reading, as she is, quite clearly," he gestured toward Evelyn, "not posthumous." A ripple of laughter broke across the room, brittle and uncertain. Candace's eyes darted. Her smile didn't falter, but her jaw did tense. Calhoun adjusted his glasses. "Today's reading is the final legal delivery of her living trust directives and revised will. These documents supersede any previous versions filed or implied." Jonah crossed his arms. His siblings glared. Candace looked faintly bored. "Let's just get on with it," she muttered. Calhoun continued, his voice even. "The estate, including liquid assets, property, and heirlooms, is hereby transferred in its entirety to Jonah Hargrove and additional beneficiaries named under sealed designation." A pause. Then, "specifically stated as Jonah and beneficiaries chosen by me." The room inhaled. Candace blinked, then stood, hand raised. "This is a mistake," she said, voice rising an octave too fast. "This wasn't in the documents I saw. She's not of sound. She's been manipulated." "Ms. Hargrove," Calhoun said firmly, "this version of the will was filed with court-verified capacity evaluations and 2 independent legal witnesses. Any attempt to contest it will be addressed under Texas probate fraud laws. If you wish to pursue action, the paperwork is available. At your own cost." Candace's mouth opened again. Nothing came out. From her seat, Evelyn reached into a slim folder and pulled out a single page. She handed it to Calhoun. He read it aloud. "Next time, respect the chair." Gasps rippled across the circle. Someone dropped a pen. One of the cousins whispered, "She means herself." Candace stood frozen, hands at her sides like dead weights. She didn't sit. She didn't storm out. She simply stood there, blinking slowly, as if trying to load a new script that wouldn't come. Calhoun closed the folio. "That concludes the reading. All documents will be digitally distributed to verified parties by end of business today. Thank you for your time." The guests began to murmur in low, urgent voices, some whispering about Evelyn's boldness, others glancing awkwardly at Candace as though unsure whether to offer sympathy or space. Jonah wheeled Evelyn out the side exit, bypassing the front entirely. Outside, the sky had finally opened up, soft rain coating the library steps in glistening sheen. Jonah held the umbrella above them both. "Did you want me to say something in there?" he asked gently. "No," Evelyn replied, voice firm. "They all heard me." The fallout came not in fire, but frost. No one screamed. No headlines exploded, just one slow, excruciating silence after another. First went the texts, left unread, then the coffee dates, gently declined, then the committee invitations, retracted without explanation. A week after the will reading, Candace checked the guest list for an upcoming charity gala and found her name missing. When she emailed to ask why, she received a single-line response: "Given recent events, we feel it's best to pause involvement." She sat back in her office chair at the design firm and stared at the screen for a full minute, trying to summon the rage. But rage requires certainty, and certainty had become a rare commodity. Her boss called her in 2 days later. It wasn't framed as a firing, of course, it never was at that level, just a restructuring, an image realignment. No hard feelings. Candace left the building without her name on the parking plaque and with one final HR folder she didn't open. The whispers had done their work. Meanwhile, in a sunlit hall on the edge of the Willow Creek campus, construction tape stretched across the new addition to the Liberal Arts Building. Gold-plated letters had already been affixed above the entry. The Evelyn Hargrove Center for Resilient Studies. The donation had gone through quietly. No press conference, no ribbon cutting. Just a quiet check, a letter from Calhoun, and Jonah's signature on the endowment transfer as acting trustee. Inside the main hallway, a portrait of Evelyn hung already, composed, unposed, her hand resting lightly on a cane. Underneath it, a single quote etched in brass: "Legacy is not given, it is built." Jonah stood beneath the plaque on a quiet Tuesday and touched the cool lettering. He didn't pose for a photo, he just nodded once before walking back outside to meet Evelyn for lunch. That same evening, they hosted a small charity dinner inside the very house Candace once remodeled with someone else's money. The new tenants, Evelyn and Jonah, had reversed much of the faux luxury design. The walls were once again a soft sage green. The mirrored gin cabinet was gone. In its place stood a dark cherry sideboard Evelyn had pulled out of storage and lovingly restored by hand. Guests from the community filtered in with home-baked pies and second-hand stories of Evelyn's quiet strength. They came not for photo ops, but for respect, for truth. Evelyn wore navy again. It was her late husband's favorite color. Jonah moved easily among the guests, topping off drinks and answering questions about the scholarship fund. At one point, he turned and caught Evelyn watching him, eyes soft, not sad. From outside, Candace sat in her car at the end of the block, parked just far enough away to avoid being noticed, but close enough to feel the sting. She didn't get out. She didn't start the engine. She just sat there, staring through the windshield at the home she'd once believed would always be hers. The home that now pulsed with warm light, familiar laughter, and none of it included her. She hadn't known they were hosting the dinner. A mutual friend had posted a blurry Instagram story, and she had watched it 3 times before grabbing her keys. Through the dining room window, she could see Jonah raising a toast. Nothing flashy, just a few words to a handful of guests who leaned in to listen. Next to him, Evelyn nodded once and lifted her own glass. They looked like family, not just by blood, but by alignment, a shared axis. In the soft glow of the chandelier, Evelyn looked older than she had in years, but somehow stronger too, as though the shedding of expectation had hardened her core rather than weakened it. Candace's throat tightened, but no tears came. She didn't see Evelyn glance toward the window. She didn't see the moment when her mother's gaze landed squarely on her silhouette, but Evelyn saw her. She held the gaze for 3 full seconds, then turned back to Jonah without hesitation. No wave, no expression, just a choice. Later that night, Candace's inbox pinged. A single new message. From Jonah. No subject line. No greeting. Just 2 words. You chose. The letter arrived on heavy cream stationery, unsigned but unmistakably Candace's. The handwriting, rounded, careful, performative, hadn't changed since her teenage years. Evelyn unfolded it slowly, Her thumb brushing along the raised embossing of a boutique letterpress logo Candace still insisted on using for formal correspondence. "We should talk," it read. "No lawyers. Just us. I think we owe each other that." Evelyn read it once. Then again. She didn't tear it. She didn't reply. She placed it in the fireproof lockbox beside her desk, between the notarized affidavit of Candace's forged pension documents and her latest medical directive, freshly signed. 3 days later, Candace sent an email. 2 sentences, vague and desperate. "I'm not the villain you've made me out to be. I want to fix this." That one Evelyn forwarded to Calhoun with a note. No response. Document receipt. Candace had always been good at damage control, crisis PR without the title, but this wasn't a brand scandal. This was rot surfacing in plain daylight, and no amount of spin could soften what Evelyn had chosen to preserve in ink and affidavit. Evelyn closed her laptop, rose slowly from her chair, and walked to the small garden just off the back porch. Jonah was already there, crouched near the herb boxes, pruning basil with the care of someone who'd never had to grow anything until recently. He looked up at her, eyes tired, unsure. "I thought I'd feel better by now," he said quietly, "but some part of me still wants her to, I don't know, apologize, explain, maybe even try." Evelyn sat beside him on the bench, taking her time to settle. "She may try," she said, voice steady, "but not because she sees you. Only because she's losing what she believes she's owed." Jonah nodded slowly, then exhaled. "I keep thinking about who I thought she was." Evelyn reached out, her fingers curling lightly over his. "You are not her legacy," she said. "You're mine. That's why you'll lead the future, not carry the past." He didn't respond right away, but his shoulders softened. Later that afternoon, Evelyn signed a legal update to her advance medical directive. She initialed every page with a clear, steady hand. Only Jonah was named as medical power of attorney. No other family member had access or authority, not even to visitation rights. The lawyer watching her sign asked gently, "Are you certain you want to lock the others out entirely?" Evelyn looked him squarely in the eye. "They walked out before I ever locked the door." While Evelyn fortified her legal peace, Candace's personal one continued to crumble. Stuart moved out quietly one Tuesday morning, leaving a handwritten note on the kitchen counter and 2 packed suitcases by the front door. He took the dog. He left behind the monogrammed pillows and a pre-filed petition for legal separation. "I can't keep pretending this version of us works," the note read. "You blame everyone else, but the silence in this house is yours." The silence grew. Without work, without her social orbit, without Jonah, and now without Stuart, Candace moved through her days with the careful precision of someone rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship. She still wore pearls, she still posted curated brunch photos, but fewer people clicked like. At the same time, the Arthur Hargrove Resilience Foundation, now under Jonah's stewardship, experienced an unexpected surge in donations following the will reading's quiet coverage in a local human interest column. Evelyn didn't grant interviews, but she did approve a single photo, her and Jonah side by side in the community garden, both holding gardening gloves and wearing content, unperformed expressions. The caption read, "Some legacies are not inherited, they're replanted." Donations tripled that week. It was just past 7 in the morning when Evelyn called Jonah. The sun hadn't yet climbed fully over the treetops, and the light in her study was still soft, unassuming. She sat at her desk, wrapped in a thick cardigan, nursing a cup of chicory coffee with one hand, while the other tapped lightly on the armrest of her chair. When Jonah picked up, his voice was still touched with sleep. "You okay?" Evelyn didn't waste time. "There's one more name," she said. "One last piece I want to put in place." He was quiet for a second. "Another beneficiary?" She nodded, though he couldn't see it. "And co-executor." That got his attention. "Of the trust?" "Yes." A pause. Not resistance, but surprise. "Who?" Evelyn reached for the photo frame she kept tucked inside her bottom drawer, a picture that hadn't seen light in years. 2 women on a porch swing in the late 70s, each holding a glass of lemonade. The woman beside her wore an oversized, sweatshirt and a look of easy joy. Gloria. They had met as teachers fresh out of grad school, both unmarried, both ferociously principled. When Gloria decided to foster a little girl named April, Evelyn was the first to help her set up a tiny bedroom, complete with a second-hand lamp Evelyn had insisted on rewiring herself. April had grown into a sharp, quietly passionate woman, a high school teacher now, running an after-school program in Houston's East Side. Her grant had just been pulled. Evelyn had seen the article in the back of the local paper, small black and white text tucked between classifieds and announcements of estate sales. "She's trying to keep that program alive with duct tape and copy paper," Evelyn said into the phone. "She's fighting the way we used to." Jonah didn't hesitate. "Let's meet her." That Friday they drove to the school. The walls inside were plastered with handmade posters and faded construction paper projects. April greeted them in the hallway. No makeup, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled to the elbows of a blazer that had seen better days. But her eyes lit up when she saw Evelyn. "Miss Evelyn," she said softly, almost in disbelief. "You came all this way?" "You remind me of someone I used to be," Evelyn replied. They sat in the back of the classroom for nearly an hour, listening as April described the challenges: lack of funding, volunteers dropping off, her own salary unpaid for 3 months. She didn't complain. She simply laid it out, clear and calm, like someone used to making something out of nothing. Back at the foundation office, Jonah turned to Evelyn and said, "She's it, isn't she?" Evelyn smiled. "She always was." 2 days later, April received a certified envelope. Inside was a formal letter naming her as co-executor and secondary beneficiary of Evelyn's trust. The packet included an annual disbursement schedule, an administrative stipend, and a handwritten note. "You were raised in resilience. You turned it into a lesson plan. Let this be your extra chalk. E.H." When Jonah read the final version of the amended trust, he sat quietly for a long time. Then he leaned back in his chair and said, "That's what you always taught me. Earn it." Evelyn looked at him with something between pride and gravity. "Legacy," she said, "isn't a windfall. It's a seed. You plant it, or it dies with you." That night, Jonah updated the foundation's website. He added April's bio to the leadership page, right beneath Evelyn's. April Jennings, co-executive director, educator, advocate, builder. As he saved the changes, he caught a glimpse of Evelyn standing in the doorway behind him, watching. She didn't say anything, just gave him a small nod and a quiet smile that meant more than any final word. The courtroom wasn't grand, just a mid-tier Harris County probate venue with faded carpeting and a judge who wore his exhaustion in the folds of his neck. Still, there was something sacred in the stillness of the space, the hush that fell as people filed in, as though the truth itself had a seat among the pews. Candace arrived first. Her hair was pressed, her suit charcoal gray, tailored in a way that strained against her posture. She walked in alone. Stuart had declined to come. So had her children. She clutched a small leather folio like it might rescue her. Evelyn entered 5 minutes later. She did not arrive in a wheelchair. She walked, slow and steady, with her graphite cane clicking like punctuation. Her blazer was dark navy again, the fabric crisp, her late husband's cufflinks glinting softly under the courtroom lights. Her lipstick was subdued, her face composed. Jonah walked beside her, not guiding, simply present. Candace turned when she heard the cane, and something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or resentment. Evelyn didn't return the glance. The judge entered. Case 0972-P, Hargrove vs. Hargrove. Petition to contest revised will and living trust. Calhoun stood and nodded. "We're prepared, Your Honor." Candace's attorney, a man who looked like he'd spent more time on television than in trial, cleared his throat. "My client believes her mother was coerced, emotionally compromised, and not of sound mind at the time of the will's amendment. We request a full voiding of all revised documents." Calhoun didn't rise to the bait. He simply passed a thick binder across the table and said, "All exhibits logged. Recorded conversations, notarized evaluations, signature verifications." We also have medical clearance dated within 24 hours of the last update, all in compliance. The judge scanned the front page. Noted. Candace was called to testify first. She spoke in phrases crafted for sympathy, deep concern, emotional distance, misunderstood intentions. Her voice wavered only where it was supposed to. She pointed to Jonah more than once, subtly shifting blame without quite naming it. I think my mother became dependent on one person's opinion, someone who doesn't understand what we've been through as a family. Did you ever attempt to legally reinstate her decision-making rights? Calhoun asked during cross. No. Did you return any of the assets purchased under the joint account? Candace hesitated. Some were non-refundable. The house was being improved. For whom? She didn't answer. Jonah took the stand last. No theatrics, just a button-down shirt and the truth. She never stopped being my mother, he said, voice calm but unsparing. Even when mine did. There was a silence so deep it felt physical. Even Candace didn't flinch. She didn't choose me to punish anyone. She chose me because I listened when she had no voice. The judge scribbled something on his pad, then looked toward Evelyn. Do you wish to speak? Evelyn stood, walked to the small podium slowly but without hesitation. She didn't read from notes. She simply looked up and spoke the way she always had when it mattered, clearly, without adornment. I am not confused, she said. I am not manipulated. I am not at war. I am simply done pretending that inheritance means entitlement. I made my choices with a clear mind, and I brought every receipt. She stepped back, sat down. That was it. The judge took less than 10 minutes to rule. The amended trust and will stand. All claims against them are dismissed. Ms. Hargrove, he looked at Candace without malice. You may file a civil appeal, but based on evidence submitted, I would not recommend it. Candace didn't argue. She didn't speak. She gathered her folio, rose, and walked out without looking at her mother. The courtroom door clicked shut behind her, like the seal on a tomb. Outside, Evelyn sat down on the bench in the hallway and exhaled slowly. Jonah leaned beside her. Are you okay? He asked. Evelyn didn't answer right away. She just said, It's done. Evelyn chose the lake house not for the water, but for the light. It was a single-story cedar-sided home tucked behind a curtain of maples at the edge of Lake Larkspur, far enough from town to feel private, but close enough for Jonah to visit without needing a GPS. The porch faced west. In the afternoons it turned to gold. The garden came first. A small L-shaped plot off the back deck, hemmed in by old railroad ties and a crooked wire fence that did little but mark boundary. Evelyn planted tomatoes, basil, and creeping thyme, the soil still cool from the last frost but eager. She worked slowly, knees cushioned on an old folded quilt, gloves hanging from her back pocket more often than on her hands. The dirt was therapeutic. Honest. Jonah began visiting on Sundays. Sometimes he brought pie. Sometimes a folder of foundation updates. Other times, just silence. They would sit on the porch, facing the lake, 2 glasses of iced tea sweating between them. You ever get lonely out here? He asked once. Evelyn smiled. I get quiet. Not the same thing. During the week, she walked to the local shelter just past the bend in the road. A faded sign out front read, Willow Bend Transitional Center. Inside, a borrowed whiteboard leaned against a wall in the rec room, beside a rack of donated coats. Her first class had 5 women. By the 3rd week, there were 14. She called the series Banking with Both Hands. Practical, blunt. She taught budgeting, how to spot payday loan scams, how to dispute a transaction and win. She brought in a notary one Wednesday and helped 2 women close joint accounts they hadn't realized were draining them. They don't teach you this, one of them said. They don't want you to know it, Evelyn replied. She never told them her name. But someone had. By May, the scholarship board had rebranded its lead initiative under Jonah's suggestion. The new name took Evelyn by surprise. She first saw it printed in clean serif font on the foundation's spring newsletter, The Chair in the Room Scholarship Fund. Underneath, a mission line. For students who are told they don't count until they do. Jonah sent her a signed copy of the charter with a sticky note attached. "You built the chair. We just offer it now." The ceremony was modest, a graduation held under a white canopy on the east lawn of Willow Creek University. Jonah stood at the podium in his robes, wind ruffling his program pages. "I don't speak here today because of inheritance," he began, voice clear. "I speak here because someone chose not to sit down. I stand because someone refused to fall." The crowd went still. Evelyn sat near the back, sunglasses on, her hands folded tightly in her lap around her late husband's watch. It had been repaired, polished, and now ticked gently against her palm. A heartbeat of memory. She didn't cry, but something deep in her stilled. After the ceremony, she declined the reception. She walked the outer path of campus instead, slow and steady. Her phone buzzed once in her cardigan pocket. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. One message. "I'm sorry." No punctuation, no name. She stood still for a moment, phone in hand. A breeze stirred the trees overhead. Somewhere nearby, students were laughing. Someone's mother was crying. Evelyn looked out at the horizon, then pressed delete. She slipped the phone back into her pocket, turned, and walked toward the garden party where Jonah was waiting to introduce her, formally, for the first time. The notebook was plain, linen-bound, navy blue, no brand, no pretension. Evelyn had started writing in it the week after the graduation ceremony, 1 entry per day, always in black ink. She didn't call them journal entries. That sounded too reflective, too contained. She called them roots, short, deliberate, pieces of herself she wanted to plant. This morning, she wrote, "Legacy is not the telling. It's the evidence that remains after you stop trying to prove yourself." The garden was thick now, parsley gone wild, tomato vines curling like lazy limbs over the lattice. Evelyn sat in the shade, cardigan sleeves pushed up, a thermos of iced coffee resting on the armrest of her chair. Jonah arrived carrying a large flat box wrapped in craft paper and string. "You didn't have to bring anything," she said, voice low but amused. "It's not for today," he replied. "It's for whenever." She opened it carefully, peeling back the paper to reveal a black and white photo, framed simply. A chair, wooden, high-backed, carved at the crown, alone in the center of an empty room. On the seat, a small brass plaque, "Evelyn Hargrove." Her breath caught, not in vanity, but in recognition. Below the photo, Jonah had written in small script, "You were never just the chair. You were the weight that made others stand." Evelyn didn't speak. She only touched the corner of the frame and let silence hold it. Later that week, she met with Calhoun one final time. The updates were straightforward. Her property, bank accounts, intellectual rights, and trust accounts would auto-transfer upon her death. No probate, no courtroom, no permission required. "Clean," he said, skimming the last page. She nodded. "It has to be." "And the family clause?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "Only by merit." In a strip mall 3 towns over, beneath the flickering hum of a worn-out fluorescent bulb, Candace rang up scented candles and throw pillows at a discount home goods store. She wore a name tag clipped sideways, hair tied back in a frizzy ponytail, lips pressed in permanent half-apology. No one asked for her stories anymore. They only asked for the price check on aisle 7. Once, she thought she'd be the kind of woman who hosted legacy galas. Now she counted out change and avoided eye contact with the women who used to invite her to brunch. Some debts don't arrive in statements. They arrive in solitude. Back in the garden, Evelyn sat on her porch for what would be her final birthday, though no one called it that. It was just a day. Sunny, wind soft, laughter curling up from the lawn like music from a half-open window. There were no gifts, only gestures. Tasha brought cookies. April brought a homemade banner. Jonah read a poem written by one of the scholarship recipients, a girl who'd once lived in a car with her mother and now led her own student group. Evelyn watched them from her chair, cheeks warm from sun and laughter, her late husband's watch ticking gently on her wrist like a pulse made permanent. She looked around, not for anyone, but at everything. No one had come out of obligation. No one had stayed for inheritance. And for the first time in her long, battle-worn life, Evelyn Hargrove was surrounded not by those who needed her money, but by those who had absorbed her values. The kind of children you choose, the kind that choose you back. As the sun dipped, casting long golden stripes across the porch, a breeze rustled the edge of the linen notebook. The final page sat open. A single sentence written there, in her hand. Peace is what's left when the fighting becomes unnecessary. The camera lifts, slow, steady. Evelyn remains seated. A woman no longer reduced, no longer erased, fully seen, not just a body in a chair. Fade to black. Her voice recorded, steady and unwavering. Some people inherit money, some inherit consequences, and some inherit wisdom. That's the one I chose to leave behind.